Hey, what's up everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we're counting down 20 shocking things you never knew about one of the funniest episodes ever put on television, I Love Lucy, Job Switching, the Chocolate Factory episode.
Hey there. All right, girls, now this is your last chance. If one piece of candy gets past you and into the packing room unwrapped, you're fired.
From a real candy worker who gave Lucille Ball an actual black eye, to the ending the production buried that nobody talks about, there's way more going on here than you think. Let's get into it. Fact 20. The entire chocolate factory scene was not in the original script. Not a single word of it. The writers built the episode around the job-switching premise. Lucy and Ethel go to work. Ricky and Fred take over the house. The candy factory was written in as the workplace, but the conveyor belt scene, the whole thing that made this episode immortal, was added during production. The writers kept building on the physical comedy possibilities of the belt and the chocolates until it consumed the episode. What everyone remembers as the reason this episode exists was essentially a late edition that took over everything around it. Fact 19. The episode is based on 2 radio scripts from a show nobody remembers. Before I Love Lucy existed, Lucille Ball starred in a CBS radio comedy called My Favorite Husband. Episodes 78 and 79 of that show were called Women's Rights Part 1 and Women's Rights Part 2. The job-switching premise came directly from those scripts. The writers Jess Oppenheimer, Madeline Pugh, and Bob Carroll Jr. adapted their own earlier work, stripped out what didn't translate to television, and rebuilt it around the visual possibilities that radio couldn't give them. The conveyor belt only exists because they had a camera this time. Fact 18. Ball and Vance went to See's Candies to train before filming. The production didn't just put 2 actresses in front of a conveyor belt and hope for the best. Lucille Ball and Vivian Vance spent time at the See's Candies factory on La Cienega Boulevard in Los Angeles, learning how candy dipping actually worked. They needed to understand the real rhythm of the job before they could convincingly fail at it. See's Candies had been operating since 1921 and is still open today. Lucy stands at the dipping station, getting covered in chocolate, and she actually knew exactly what she was supposed to be doing. She was just doing it wrong on purpose. Fact 17. The candy dipper who slapped Lucy had never seen the show. The woman working alongside Lucy in the chocolate dipping scene was a real candy maker named Amanda Milligan. She was an actual employee at the farmer's market in Hollywood, not an actress. She had never watched I Love Lucy before filming because she spent her Monday nights watching wrestling instead. Milligan had lines written for her in the original script, but they were cut because she was too uncomfortable speaking on camera. Lucy stands next to Milligan at the dipping station, and the woman next to her is the only person on that set who had no idea how big the show was. Fact 16. Ball deliberately hit Milligan hard to get a real reaction. During rehearsals, Milligan kept tapping Lucy too gently with the chocolate glob. The slap wasn't landing. Ball knew the scene needed a real physical reaction, so she came up with a plan. When the cameras rolled, Lucy swatted a fly off Milligan's nose significantly harder than they had rehearsed. Milligan's instinct kicked in, and she walloped Lucy back with everything she had. The shock on Lucy's face in that moment is completely real. It was so hard it gave Ball a partial black eye, and that is the take that made it to air. Fact 15. This was the first episode directed by William Asher, who went on to direct 102 of the 179 total episodes. William Asher stepped in to direct Job Switching, and apparently nobody wanted him to leave. He ended up directing more episodes of I Love Lucy than anyone else in the show's history, 102 out of 179. That's more than half the entire series run. The Lucy and Ethel conveyor belt scene was essentially his audition. It worked out. Asher later married Elizabeth Montgomery and directed Bewitched. And in a full-circle moment, he recreated the conveyor belt scene in a 1969 Bewitched episode, this time with ice cream instead of chocolate. Fact 14. The rating was 64.4, which is statistically impossible by today's standards. The episode pulled a Nielsen rating of 64.4 with a 60 share, when it aired on September 15, 1952. That means roughly 64 out of every 100 American households with a television were watching this specific episode. For comparison, the most watched television event in recent decades, Super Bowl LIX in 2025, pulled around a 53 share. A 1952 episode of a sitcom about a woman stuffing chocolates in her hat outperformed every Super Bowl ever measured. Lucy shoves a chocolate into her mouth and looks directly at the camera, and nearly 2/3 of America is watching her do it. Fact 13. Ricky's fall in the kitchen was a complete accident that badly hurt Desi Arnaz. In the kitchen scenes where Ricky and Fred try and fail to cook, Desi Arnaz slips and falls on rice he spilled on the floor. The audience loved it. The thing is, it wasn't scripted. Arnaz actually slipped for real and went down hard. He bruised his ribs badly enough that he was in genuine pain for days after filming. But the live audience's reaction when he fell was so good that he got up and did it again deliberately for a second take, injured ribs and all. Ricky hits the floor in the kitchen, and what looks like a perfectly timed piece of physical comedy is a man who just hurt himself deciding to do it again. Fact 12. The factory's name is almost never said correctly by anyone. Everyone calls it the Chocolate Factory. That's not what it's called. The place where Lucy and Ethel work is Kramer's Candy Kitchen. Not Chocolate Kitchen Candy Kitchen, with a K. The name indicates they make all types of candy, not just chocolate. The show is very clear about the name. The foreman says it, the sign is on the wall. And for 73 years, almost everyone who has ever referenced this episode has called it the Chocolate Factory. Lucy wraps a piece of candy at Kramer's Candy Kitchen, and the world has been calling it the wrong thing since 1952. Fact 11. The foreman who terrifies Lucy and Ethel was a veteran actress who became famous for a completely different show. Elvia Allman plays the candy factory foreman who tells Lucy and Ethel that if one piece of unwrapped chocolate makes it down that belt, they're fired. She is sharp and merciless, and the scene doesn't work without her. Allman had been working in Hollywood since the 1930s and later became widely known for playing Selma Plout on Petticoat Junction. The foreman walks past Lucy and Ethel and checks the belt, and the actress delivering that performance had already been in the business for 20 years before this episode and would keep going for decades after. Fact 10. The conveyor belt speed was controlled manually, off-camera system, gradually increasing the belt speed. Someone stood off camera with a hand on a speed control and physically turned it up as the scene progressed, watching Ball and Vance and timing the increases to match their reactions. The escalation you see on screen, the belt getting faster, the chocolates piling up, Lucy and Ethel getting increasingly desperate, was a live collaboration between the actresses and whoever was running that dial off camera. Lucy grabs 2 chocolates and stuffs them in her hat, and the belt gets faster because a person watching her decided that was exactly the right moment. Fact 9. Lucy eating a chocolate too early during filming forced a reset. During one of the conveyor belt takes, Ball reached out and ate a chocolate from the belt before the scene had reached the point where Lucy was supposed to start eating them. She realized the mistake immediately, pulled the chocolate back out of her mouth, and dropped it on the floor. The take had to be reset. It's a small blooper that almost nobody would have caught, but the production team saw it in real time and stopped everything. Lucy drops the chocolate on the floor, and the scene that looks completely spontaneous had rules that even Ball herself had to follow. Fact 8. The episode was filmed in May 1952, but held for 4 months before airing. Job switching was filmed on May 30, 1952, at General Service Studios. It didn't air until September 15, 1952, more than 3.5 months later. It was one of 5 episodes filmed that May and held back for the start of Season 2. The live audience that watched filming in May 1952 saw the conveyor belt scene before anyone else in the world, and then had to wait until autumn to find out if anyone else thought it was funny. Lucy shoves chocolates into her blouse in front of a studio audience in May, and the rest of America doesn't see it until September. Fact 7. The episode directly inspired a scene in Pretty Woman. In the 1990 film Pretty Woman, Vivian and Edward watch television in their hotel room. What they're watching is the job-switching episode, specifically the conveyor belt scene. Director Gary Marshall put it in, deliberately, as a character beat. Two people from completely different worlds finding common ground watching the same old television show. Lucy and Ethel start stuffing chocolates into their hats, and Richard Gere and Julia Roberts watch them do it, and the most iconic scene from a 1952 sitcom ends up doing emotional work in a 1990 Hollywood romantic comedy. Fact 6. Saturday Night Live recreated the scene with nuclear warheads. In March 1977, Gilda Radner appeared on Saturday Night Live as Lucy Ricardo in a sketch that put the conveyor belt scene in a weapons factory. Instead of chocolates, Radner was stuffing nuclear warheads into her hat and blouse. The sketch was filmed in scratchy black and white to look like the original episode. It ran on live network television as a direct parody of one of the most beloved moments in American comedy history. Kate McKinnon later played Lucy in another SNL sketch referencing the same scene in 2014. Lucy grabs a warhead and shoves it under her hat, and Gilda Radner's version of that moment aired on NBC 25 years after the original. Fact 5. The episode was based on a real argument about housework that Lucille Ball had with Desi Arnaz. The premise of job switching, that the men think housework is easy and the women think earning money is easy, so they switch, came directly from arguments Ball and Arnaz were having at home during the show's early run. Arnaz would complain about Lucy's spending. Ball would push back that running a household was real work. The writers were aware of the dynamic because Ball and Arnaz didn't hide it. Lucy slams her checkbook on the table and tells Ricky she doesn't know why she bothers explaining anything to him. And the woman delivering that line had said something very close to it in real life before the cameras were ever set up. Fact 4. The episode launched a template that television has been copying for 73 years. The conveyor belt scene in job switching is the direct ancestor of every assembly line comedy bit in the history of television. Drake and Josh did it with sushi at a factory called Ball and Vance, a direct name check. Bewitched recreated it with ice cream. My Little Pony did it with cherries. Cutthroat Kitchen built an entire cooking competition sabotage around it. The template is always the same. Task looks manageable, pace increases, chaos follows, hiding becomes the only option. Lucy stuffs a chocolate in her hat. And the joke she invented in 1952 has been running in new forms on television screens every decade since. Fact 3. Vivian Vance had a contract clause requiring her to stay heavier than Lucille Ball. This is one of the stranger pieces of television history attached to this episode. Vivian Vance's contract with Desilu Productions contained a clause requiring her to remain noticeably heavier than Lucille Ball throughout the run of the show. The reasoning was that Ethel needed to look frumpy and domestic next to Lucy's glamour. Vance resented the clause deeply and talked about it publicly in later years, calling it humiliating. Ethel and Lucy stand side by side at the conveyor belt, and the physical contrast between them that the camera keeps returning to was not accidental. It was contractual. Fact 2. The men buying 5-pound boxes of chocolate at the end was not a joke. It was a surrender. At the end of the episode, Ricky and Fred show up at the apartment having completely destroyed the kitchen and burned the laundry. They're carrying 5-pound boxes of chocolate as a peace offering for Lucy and Ethel. It's played as a gag. But look at what just happened. The women came home from the candy factory with their clothes stuffed full of chocolates they hid from their boss. The men came home with chocolate they bought because they couldn't handle the housework. Both sides lost completely, and neither one will admit it. Ricky sets the chocolate box on the table, and the bet ends in a draw that everyone in the room pretends is a win. Fact 1. The episode has a tag scene that was cut from syndication for decades and changes the ending completely. This is what most people have never seen. The version of job switching that aired in syndication for years ended with Lucy and Ethel coming home from the factory stuffed with chocolate and Ricky and Fred walking in with the 5-pound boxes. That's where most people think it stops. The original broadcast had a tag scene after that. Lucy and Ethel completely exhausted and covered in chocolate, sit down and open the boxes the men brought home. They look at the chocolate. They look at each other. And they put the lids back on and push the boxes away. After an entire day of handling chocolate, the last thing either of them wants is to eat any. The joke that the episode had been building to that both sides learned their lesson gets its actual punchline in that final moment. And for decades of reruns, nobody saw it. The scene was cut for time. When the episode was trimmed for syndication, Lucy pushes the lid back onto the chocolate box, and that's the real ending of the episode. Most people watching today have never seen it. If that changed how you see this episode, hit subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from.